Kind of cool outside.
A little bit.
Just a little. Thank God we're not getting snow like North Carolina and plum places, ain't we?
I bet they're tickled.
Some people don't have salt trucks and stuff like that down in there. You know, they might over in the mountain area, but get away from that. They don't know how to drive on that, and they don't have anything to treat it with. So let's pray for them this morning. Anybody have a testimony this morning before we get into the Sunday school lesson?
I didn't get it. Say love the Lord. Thankful for His thankful for keeping me. We could have gotten hurt really bad. Just thankful that He was with us.
Amen. We're thankful as well. They were headed to Virginia and got as far as almost to Albany.
No, we were
On the other side of Albany, Dave decided to go deer hunting. Ask him if he's going to get it mounted.
Susie's new car.
With Susie's new car, yeah. So, but anyhow, thankful they're all right. You know, cars can be fixed or be replaced. Amen. But choir leaders, hard to find. Deacons are a dime a dozen. Oh. What they say about preachers, I just thought I'd pass that on. Last week, in chapter 11, we only had 10 verses. Chapter 12 this week has 51 bunches. So if we do not get through all 51 of those, we will split it up and go into next week. But if I would put a heading, I guess, on today, it would be a new start. How many in this life have run across, or in this building, that have run across times in your life that you'd like to have a brand new start? Everybody in here, you young people, you know, you ain't got there yet, but these people are oppressed, have been oppressed for 400 years. And that means that they've been lied on, cheated, treated like trash, and looked like nobody cared. That's just the fact of the matter. Looked like God wasn't hearing their prayers. Anybody ever felt like God wasn't hearing your prayer? Imagine these people, again, for 400 years praying, God, get us out of here. God, why are you not hearing our prayer? God, why are you not answering our prayer?
And then when He did make it show, it got worse for them.
And it's got worse when God said, I'm here. I have heard your prayers. I'm going to live here. And all it's done for the last ever how many months as the leading up to this, it's gotten worse. Until now. All good things must come to an end. I've always heard that. But what's good things? We don't know what heaven holds. Paul said we see through a glass darkly. I realize John recorded walls of jasper, gates of pearl, street of gold. He began to describe a little bit of what heaven looks like. But when we think of heaven, the only thing that we know to compare it to is what we have here. Anybody ever been there? Yes. You been to heaven? No. Oh. I've been there to compare. When we try to compare, when we're at peace and we're at our happiest point here, that still doesn't compare to what heaven's going to be like. Let's reverse that. When we're at our lowest, our worst state, our worst, most horrible day of our life here, also does not compare to what's waiting in hell. And that's why that we need to shake ourselves and be more concerned about getting souls won to Christ. That's number one reason. Number two reason is, man, as sands through the hourglass, so goes the days of our lives. And the older we get, the faster they go.
You know, I never thought of getting old. Never did. And now that I'm near there.
Near there. You're on your way, ain't you?
Where did it go? Because I talk to all these older guys, which are 80, and they say, "You're still young." Yeah, try climbing the ladder, try back in these shingles. But I said, I never ever thought of that. And here I am, and I think, where did it go? I mean, I had fun most of my life. I can honestly say. If I die tomorrow, it really doesn't matter. But I think, the abuse we did, we're paying for now. You can't change it, you just got to deal with it now.
Well, I was saved at the age of 10 in 1976, December 31st, 1976. And, preachers were preaching then that the Lord could come any minute. So I'm like, well, here come 1980. I'm like, well, he ain't come yet. Boy, he'll come real soon. Here come 1990. Well, surely we'll not see 2000. I mean, do you remember the preachers that were preaching, the Y2K, the world time, the time, they said that the world clock it's not smart enough to turn over to 2000. Computers were shut down. Everything's going to crash. I mean, people stockpiled food and ammunition and money and everything. And time rolled on. We're almost done with 2018. And time's still rolling on. But there's coming a time. There's a fellow going to set one foot on the land, one foot on the sea, lift his hand toward heaven and said, time is no more.
Well, you can look at the world now and what our kids and yours and all are going to see. And what we've seen in our few years, what's the change that's taking place. And I said, it just breaks your heart. I mean, first off, people don't care. They just live their life, eat, drink, be merry, as the Bible talks about. You try to talk to them, and I said, they don't care. And some of us Christian people, I mean, a lot of them, don't need to care. But I said, that's the world. I mean, look at what's going on our TVs now that we see. And you would never see that when we were young. You've never seen two guys kissing or two women, and you never seen that stuff. And you never heard words like you hear now.
And those are primetime shows.
And they're showing our kids, this is the way it is. And they get conditioned to this. And that's what scares you. You try to talk to them, but...
All right. Let's jump into these 51 verses and get as far as we can. Someone read the first chapter 12, the book of Exodus. Someone read the first 6 verses.
Then the Lord spake to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of the month, and it shall be the first month of the year to you. And speak you all unto the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their father, and a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him, his neighbor, next to his house, take according to the number of souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count of the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish. The male of the first year you shall take it out from the sheep or from the goat.
And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall do it in the evening.
All right. Let's go back and remember one thing, that when the Bible was written, it wasn't written in chapters and verses. When it was translated into our version, the King James Version that we have today, then was when it was broken down into chapters and verses. So this really, it's not that God come to Moses and Aaron on a different day. This is the same day or same time that he had spoke to them in the chapter that we just read last week, chapter 11. So here God again speaks to Aaron and Moses in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." God's restarting their calendar. Why would God restart their calendar?
With their beginning of a new life.
They were,
Was they under the Egyptians' calendar?
yes, the Egyptians were the smartest people in the world at that time. I mean, people are still amazed. I mean, when you look at the pyramids and know that they didn't have the cranes and the things that they have, and that those things were built, and how perfect they are, and how that they're constructed, and they've withstood the storms that they have withstood, and the sun and whatever for all these centuries. It is one of the wonders of the world.
But the Jews have their own calendars, don't they?
Here's what God's doing. All right? When they came up into Egypt, how many came? Anybody remember? 70. Is that a nation? Could 70 people be considered a nation? God's saying now, the world will know that you are a separated nation of people. I mean, God said he was going to do that when he called Abraham out and started with one. Now we'll read in our lesson today, if we get that far, there is 600,000 men besides the children, them that were, and by the way, that's everybody, any man that's above the age of 20. We don't know how many were under from there all the way down to babies. We don't know how many women were there. These were men armed ready for war. So these were men that we could probably say that there's some even, again, that from 20 to 50 was when they would serve for warfare. So it's possible that there were even some, but older, that's not counted here. We don't know. It's estimated anywhere from 3 million people, and I've heard as high as 8 million people came up out of here. We don't actually know. What we do know is that God doesn't bring a family out. God brings a nation out of these people.
Beginning of a new nation.
The beginning of a new nation. That's why God's resetting their calendar, because they're just Abraham's children. Now they'll be called the children of Israel. Even though they're Abraham's seed, notice they are called the children of Israel. Israel's who? Abraham's grandson, which was Jacob. That God changed his name to Israel. Think about the name Israel and what this nation is called Israel. What did God say? What is the definition of the name Israel to God? A prince who has power with God. That's a pretty good name. A prince who has power with God. So because when they get from here, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, but I just want to use that to make a point. When they get from Egypt and they get to Jericho, 40 years later, all the mighty works that their God done in that land, the people of Jericho are trembling because the children of Israel is outside. The children of Israel, a prince who has power, they know that God fights for them. Do you know that today? Yes. If the devil had had his way yesterday, them two people would have died. If the devil could right now, he would take our minds, our speech, he would afflict us in any way, every way possible to destroy us or discourage us. God's in control of that. Some of you don't know, Johnny spent Thursday night and most of the day Friday in the hospital with chest pains. I mean, the same symptoms as he had his previous heart attacks. He's still here. The Bible said we have an adversary, the devil, that's going forth as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. As a roaring lion. Didn't say he was the roaring lion, but he's going forth as a roaring lion. He's making a lot of noise. All right. Speak unto the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Why? I'm asking questions. Why would God do such a thing as this? Why not have leftovers? Because God doesn't intend for, he doesn't want any of it to remain to the morning. Why this lamb specifically for each house? Do what, Judy? The new beginning, but the thing really is what does this lamb do? This lamb represents Christ. Every home needs Jesus. Right? And if the household feels like it's too small for this lamb, they are to share this lamb. Boy, there's a message. Are you sharing the lamb? That preached, Dave. Are you sharing the lamb? How well are we as a church doing that?
Good, I'd pray.
Huh?
Good, I'd pray.
Good, I would pray. Not good, I know. How do I know that? How many people are we being seen? Uh-oh. I'm just stating facts. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just stating facts. So every man, every household shall take this lamb, all right? If the household's too small, they're to share it. Your lamb shall be without, what's that next word? We actually could put this in there. Your lamb must be perfect. Must be perfect. Without spot, without blemish. In other words, can't be no black wool in it. It cannot have any sores. Cannot be sick. It's got to be completely healthy. In other words, the best that you have, the best lamb in the flock, God always wants our best. He gave the best for sure, didn't He?
Yes.
Why would God want our best other than the fact that He gave our best? He gave His best. Why would God require the best lamb? Why not any lamb? Because here's why. When God sat down, now you've got to remember, the plan of salvation was set in effect before the world was formed. Before there was any stars, before the moon and the sun, before any of that, the plan of salvation was set in effect. God chose in to give the best. So now what God is saying to us is that it requires the best to save. The blood of the best is what we're going to see to save a man. Because that's what this lamb is about. It's not about eating. It's not about them leaving. When we gather around that table and we partake of the sacrament together, the blood, the wine and the bread as the blood, which is the Passover that's being instituted here, it's a sacred thing. It's not to be taken lightly. This matter, this is to protect them from death. And death is what? Separation. What God is saying is, I'm finally going to separate the nation of Israel from the rest of the world. That's really what God's doing here. Do you know that? Because if you went through the land of Egypt and you took a census, guess what? Them people dwelled in the land of Egypt. They were not Egyptians, but they dwelt there.
Most of them, that's all they knew.
And again, I guarantee everybody here has been born in the land of Egypt. There's nobody here that knows anything about the land of Canaan. Not Moses, not Aaron, not anybody in the whole building knows anything about the land of Canaan. So these people, all they've ever known all their life is, the land of Goshen and the land of Egypt. That's all they've ever known.
400 years is a lot of generations.
Been a lot of generations. Joseph who? I realize they didn't have schools like what we had today. Things were passed down in the family. That's how they learned history. How did we get here? Are we not supposed to be here? How many here know actually where your ancestors came from?
Where part of them came from. Mother's side was pure Welsh. She's Welsh.
Which is from Wales.
My great grandfather came from Germany. I can go back that far.
Our last name, my last name, or Michelle's maiden name, was Fortner, which is German. My mother's last name was Walls, which is British or English. So that's where that goes back to. Actually, I was on Ellis Island and I saw some Wallses on that plaque with those names that they had written on that paper. As you could go through there and look at some of those pages. That's pretty neat. Pretty neat to think. You wonder, is this my kin? Yeah. But anyhow, without blemish, a male of the first year, And ye shall take it out of the sheep or of the goats, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. What time did Jesus die? Huh? 9th hour of the day in the evening. The 6th hour of the day, by the way, was considered night. Or the 12th hour, sorry. It's what we would call 6 o'clock of the evening was considered night. Night was from the 12th hour, or I guess would be the first hour of the night, but 12-hour days, 12-hour nights is how they went by that. Verse 7, then shall they take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorpost of the house wherein they shall eat it. On the inside or the outside? On the outside. Why on the outside? So it could be seen. Now, was God able to see inside the house without, Yes. But it was a symbol on the outside to the world that you were partakers in this holy divine covenant. So we don't walk around with blood applied to the outside of our bodies. Our blood, the blood of Jesus Christ, is applied to the door of our heart if you have it.
There should be that appearance that the blood was washed from the inside to the outside.
In other words, that house would look different from if the house next door didn't have it, it would stand out. We live in a dark world today, and we as Christians are to be the light of the world. We should stand out. Not to draw attention to ourselves. Remember everything that Jesus did. Again, he fed 7,000 one day, 4,000. This is just men, or 5,000, I'm sorry, not 7,000. 5,000 one day, 4,000 another day. He opened the eyes of the blind. He healed the leper. He healed the lame. He raised the dead. Did he do any of that to draw attention to himself? It was always to point to Christ. Our actions should always point to God. They don't. I'm speaking for myself. I fail at that sometimes. Right? We're none of us perfect. None of us good, no, not one. But our lives on a continual basis should point to Christ. Faithfulness. All right, let's go on. We've got a long way to go, short time to get there. And they shall eat the flesh in the night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herb shall they eat it. I can understand the roasting with fire, all right? How many like bitter herbs? Why the bitter herbs?
That represents the Word of God.
The bitter herbs?
Yeah. Well, doesn't it say something about bitter to the stomach?
Ezekiel was commanded to eat a roll. He said, in your mouth it'll be sweet, but in your stomach it'll be bitter.
Right. That was the Word of God.
I think it means this. I think it means this. With those bitter herbs represented, in my mind, all the suffering that they went through. The lamb represented their freedom from where they were going. That bitter herbs, when they ate them, was only temporary. True? The bitter herbs might taste bitter in your mouth. They won't sustain you for anything. But you eat that lamb, that'll hold you for a while. We were in Sam's Club Friday evening, Rhonda and I, and we did a little shopping there, and we were back in the grocery section, and there's a rack of lamb. Oh, Lord. I'd like to know what that tastes like, but I can't afford that. That was expensive stuff. I mean, expensive stuff. You can get a lot of prime rib for that. And it was a little piece. I mean, it was about probably, I think it had 4 or maybe 5 ribs, and just the meat was attached to that. And I'm like, no. If I remember right, it was $35 and some change for that little rack of lamb. But really, again, I think the fact of the matter, or the point that God's trying to say here is these bitter herbs. Paul said, I reckon that the sufferings of this present world are not worthy to be compared to the glory that shall be revealed in us. Everything that we go through down here is temporary. Everything that we go through is temporary. The things with God are eternal. Eat it not raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his legs with his ears, and the purtenance thereof, and ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. Why? Why not? If you eat it all, and if anything remains, you get rid of it. Why?
I mean, to me, he's just going to replenish the next batch. I mean, he always will. But I don't know what's there.
Because it is sacred. Again, this lamb stood in their place. The blood of this lamb is what stood between them and death. Again, the body of this lamb represented them leaving here, leaving all their cares, all their troubles behind, all their heartache, all their sorrow, everything that they've come to know and trust in. They're leaving it all. You're
Always.
the old man. You're not slaves anymore. That's what God's saying.
If you ain't describing the born again experience, new birth.
That's what's going on. Again, a nation is being born here. Ladies, is there pain in giving birth to a child? The bitter herbs. Now, as they do this as a memorial for perpetual, in other words, continual or forever, throughout all generations, they're to eat this lamb with the bitter herbs and unleavened bread throughout all generations. Again, that lamb is a sacrifice for their freedom. Those bitter herbs are to remind them of their sorrow. Now, this is not collard greens, all right? Or kale or cooked broccoli or whatever that we're talking about here, these herbs. This is only a little bit. So everything that we have, it's just little compared to what's waiting in the promised land. Imagine sitting there. I know this is a big play on imagination, but imagine sitting there eating that lamb with them bitter herbs that taste horrible, thinking about the cluster of grapes, if it was possible, that Caleb and Joshua bring in later on. What God, the imagination that they've got. God has promised, I'm taking you to a land that flows with milk and with honey. How many likes milk? Is honey bitter? It's sweet. If you don't use honey, what happens to honey, Gary, if you don't use honey, if it sits too long? It turns to pure sugar. A crystal-like sugar. That's what it turns to by just sitting there. So everything that's bitter, you're leaving behind and you're going to that which is sweet. He said, I'm going to give you the fat of the land that's flowing with milk and honey. How many like fresh milk besides me? Been a long, long time since I had any fresh milk. If you have never had fresh milk, you've been cheated out of a blessing. Now I want to throw this out. As long as that cow ain't been eating green onions. But if the cow's been kept out of the green onions and you've got that fresh milk that they skim the cream off of it and they strain it and they cool that thing down and then skim the cream off of it and just pour your big old glass of that, man, you talking about rich. It's good, ain't they? But all you need is that big a piece of cornbread, ain't it? You got a meal. It'll fill you up. It'll satisfy you. So God's saying, I'm going to leave all your troubles here and I'm going to take you out and you'll be satisfied. The problem with these people is they never made it there. They never got to enjoy the things that God promised them. Why? Because they didn't trust Him. I wonder how many things we go through and how many things that we get or fail to enjoy here because we're not obedient and trust what God says us to do. A lot. There's two different people at the same time. A lot. A lot. So if God is leading you to do something, I want you to understand this. It's not for God's good. It's for yours. I'm telling you, the hardest thing I've ever had to do was when God spoke to me to leave West Virginia and to move to Ohio. Now, you got to understand, for a while, till I could get a place for my family to live, I was living here, they were living there. But again, picture this. The church that I was pastoring, in 6 months, it had 26 people saved in 6 months. I mean, service after service after service, people were getting saved. I mean, we didn't meet that God didn't pour out the Holy Spirit. And then all of a sudden God says, move that. Now, I was obedient to what God told me to do. But do you think that I enjoyed that transition?
Stop thinking about Philip when he was having such success in the scriptures. God called him to go down there and water, talk to one man.
The only church I'd ever preached in Ohio before I moved here, is I'd preached a little bit in Silver Memorial down there. Me and Jackie had held a revival, and then I'd preached there on a Saturday night. The agreements came down and sang Friday or Saturday night, and I preached that night. That's the only 2 times that I'd ever preached here in Ohio. I didn't know anything about anybody else down here. I mean, I knew my aunt, and I love my aunt. Some of my best memories is is laying in her bedroom looking out the window at that big red light over on the hill at Centerville. Eating peas. But going to Kings Island. I mean, I had great memories down here. But everybody, you know how your church, I mean, I love you folks. All right? But I love that church. I'm just telling you. Now, every friend that we had, guess where they were? Rhonda will tell you this is the truth. I had friends, we would go back, because I didn't resign from the church right away. I went back there some on the weekends and would preach like Sunday and then we'd come home. There was a couple of times, there was guys come with us and said, we'll load everything in your truck right now and we'll take it back. You know how tempting that was to return? Because everything you know and love is there. I walked into Silver Memorial Church and I sat down with my mother after we were down here. And I looked around and there was 4 or 5 preachers there at that time. And I said, God, you did not move me from West Virginia to Ohio to call me down here, sit among all these preachers. I don't know, but I know this is not your plan. It can't. Finally, Andrew looked at me one night and said, there's a church up the road. You're praying for a pastor. They don't need one. You might as well go check them out. And I was there for 3.5 years. Anyhow, so I know that's a lot to get to. And the blood, I skipped down, didn't I? Yep. And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand. Ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. Now think about this picture. When you get sitting down to eat table, is this how you plan on eating? Do you think this is how they've ever ate? I mean, you've worked hard all day, Gary. You've put on 25 squares of shingles. That's a day's work and a half. If you've got 25 square on a day, but you come home, do you carry your tool belt on you into the house? What were these people's occupation? I mean, they were shepherds by trade. Your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. Your loins girded. Why would you have your loins girded? Ready to go, ready to run. You didn't gird up your loins when you were walking. You were girded up your loins when you were ready to run. Now, eat in haste, I can understand that. I like doing that, don't you?
This will say he must be real fast.
Yeah, but now, Randy Parsons. Y'all ever been with him, watch him eat? Oh, Lord, have mercy. I've never seen a man eat so slow in my life as Randy Parsons. Have you, Rhonda? Rhonda can beat Randy Parsons. Rhonda eats slow. I mean, she pretty well always the last one to finish, ain't she, Joe? No, you don't have to get yourself in trouble, Joe. You just sat there. You ain't talking about your sister-in-law, your favorite sister-in-law, right? Uh-oh. Don't let that out of the house.
I tell them all.
It is the Lord's. This is not for you. It's God's doing. And they're doing it in obedience. This is not, I'm telling you, how many would cook, if you're going to cook a meal, how many would fix a meal like this? None of us would. I mean, if you had your choice, what is them things we get from the Mexican, them little flour? If you had your choice between a tortilla and a biscuit, how many would choose a tortilla? That that little flat piece of bread ain't got no much taste to it. I mean, all it's good for is rolling that stuff up or sopping something up, you know. But I tell you what, a biscuit is good anytime. My Uncle Tony that came here a few times, and Jason was here once or twice with him before he died. And when Martha would come over to my mom's house and visit, he would drag Martha into the kitchen to grab my mom's biscuits. Biscuits are always good. So the bread, again, it's unleavened, a little thin cake of bread. There's no yeast in it to make it rise. It's bitter herbs, meat roasted with fire. It's not sodden. In other words, it's not, it's probably dry, right? For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all gods of the Egyptian will I execute judgment. I am the Lord. Again, God doesn't say he's going to send the death angel through there. I will pass through. And the blood shall be a token for you upon the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it as a feast unto the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it as a feast by an ordinance forever. Ordinance forever. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. In other words, God said, I'll remove your name out of the family of God if you eat unleavened bread. Why 7 days? 7 is the number of completeness. The number of completeness. All right? Let's stop right there. Let's mark that and stop right there. Sorry for rabbit chasing a little bit too much this morning and not getting any farther than what I did, but it is what it is, huh? Well, let me have your pen. I'm going to mark that.